Just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know that there's been a lot of talk and discussion and concerns regarding the flock cameras. So I thought it would be somewhat interesting to have a different perspective. I know that the police chief has done a couple talking events on radio stations, and they've put out some information on Facebook, which is great. I just wanted to be able to get the other side of the conversation from the people's perspective. So without any delay, I'm going to hand it over to our MC, Rick Poach, and he will go ahead and introduce each of our speakers tonight.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Rick Poach. You may recognize me from the beer around town. I'd like to thank the mayor, city council members, representatives, and people from Cheyenne for attending. And our first speaker tonight is going to be Mr. John McKinney. John McKinney is a fiber and broadband consultant who believes that technology should serve the public, not the other way around. With over 25 years of experience in infrastructure, John has dedicated his career to ensuring that as we adopt artificial intelligence and tools like flock cameras, we don't sacrifice our constitutional rights in the name of progress. He joins us today to lead a meaningful conversation on how we can balance modern safety with the enduring responsibilities of a free society. Mr. John McKinney.
Hello, and thanks for having me up here in Cheyenne. It's a beautiful drive to come up here, and I actually love your city. Today I'm going to try to put on my consultant hat and do a little more guiding. I think one of the first rules about Cheyenne is if somebody comes up from Denver and tells you what to do, send them back to Denver. And so with that, I wanted to maybe share some information about the technology, talk about ways to have meaningful conversation, but also not necessarily tell you what to do. And the goal of this, at least my portion of this presentation, is it's okay if flock is correct for your city. It's okay if flock's not right for your city. What's not okay is to not understand this technology and what it does, and the risks associated with it, and also hopefully the benefits associated with it. Right? There's a reason this was brought forward. So with that, real quick, a little bit about me. I'm 25 years in fiber and broadband. My specialization is construction in the public right-of-way. And with that, what it leads me to is a lot of smart city, because everything connects to the infrastructure in the public right-of-way. So it leads me to a lot of smart city consulting, technology consulting. It touches a lot of different items. With that, in my career, I'm responsible for over 10,000 traffic jams. Every single time I draw on a piece of paper, you guys end up backed up in your cars. And so with that, as somebody that's kind of made my living off imposing upon the public, I feel like when I have an opportunity to give back, either through methodologies or meaningful conversation, I try to do so. So anyway, next time you're in a traffic jam, you can think of me. But also, I'm a real advocate for preserving our constitutional rights. And in my case, that relates to new technologies, no matter what they are. So I did put up a little picture of a flock camera. You probably see those around town. And that. So let's talk about flock in your community and the information on that. So per DeFlock.org or DeFlock.me, who has a map, a crowdsourced map. There are 23 known flock cameras in the city of Cheyenne. Actually seeing that I think a couple were added, so that may be 24 right now. But certainly cameras have been implemented in Cheyenne. And then the data that those cameras collect, and I will give the caveat, the data that the city-owned cameras collect is currently held for 30 days. The data is basically captured by the camera, sent off to a database, and then after 30 days, it's deleted from that database unless it has been involved in an investigation. And with that, like to also jump into why those cameras are here for the city. Now, this should look familiar to you guys because it's straight off your accountability portal. On there, really without reading through this, the police have said it helps them do police stuff. Right. The first one, locate stolen vehicles. There's other items on there. For most cities, with the recent implementation of ALPRs in the last couple of years, the locate stolen vehicles is actually one of the top items on the list. I did not see that in any of the transparency portal, there wasn't a list for a specific instance of why this is. But so I will say in Cheyenne, they've said this is the reason we want to have it. However, one thing I do want to interpret, like when the city of Denver says we had an increase in stolen vehicles, therefore we needed flock cameras, I'd like to expand on that a little bit, right? And that is a Korean manufacturer built a car with substandard security, and then a Chinese media platform told you how to exploit that security, and therefore maybe we want to give up a few rights. And for me, that's unacceptable in a lot of ways. First and foremost, if there's a bill, it ought to be sent to the local Kia dealership. But also, I'm not willing to give up my rights because of something that happens in China, same as Iran or anything like that. But I will give the caveat that I did not see that it was due to an increase in stolen vehicles in Cheyenne. Here, and this is coming straight from the transparency portal, I will say we give from an outsider point of view, I would give the Cheyenne police a above average grade on transparency. Now, this is a similar transparency portal that you'll see because it's provided by Flock Security and it's generated by Flock Security. So it's kind of their way of answering questions, but on it does say prohibited uses, access policy. Now, also there's a secondary website where I got the previous slide from that has additional transparency information. There's some good things we saw on that two-factor authentication. They're required for case numbers, things like that. So there are absolutely policies that with the Cheyenne Police Department that you can follow up on or that should be audited by the city. But if those policies are in place, I will say there's no reason to riot immediately down to the police station, right? Is with that. Now we're going to get to the caveat on that, and this is actually just a capture from Flock Security's advertising site. And you see here there is 5,000 law enforcement agencies, 6,000 communities, 1,000 businesses. So when we talk about the policies that are put in place by the Cheyenne Police Department, those policies are only for the police department. They are not being enforced necessarily by the communities, HOAs that have put in these cameras, and not at all by, but for example, Lowe's or Home Depot, Walmart, places where you'll see flock cameras as you go into the parking lots. So one of the things that we actually want to encourage when we talk about these types of devices is that it's not just about police department policy. Right? There's other companies that are using this same device and reporting, and they're not held accountable to police policy. They're held accountable to the laws. And if the laws don't say you can't share data, they're going to share data. So now, why is this? What does this tool do? And I like to sum it up in just one sentence, and that is: a picture is worth 1,000 search terms. So what a flock camera does is, as a car drives by it, it captures the license plate information, if it's there, reads it, tries to read through if it's obscured a little bit, but it also collects information on the car. And the term that Flock uses for this is a vehicle fingerprint. And so it can tell you whether that car has dents in it, whether it has a ski rack, whether it has a bumper sticker, as well. And this is exactly what it says on the Flock Safety website, and that's no plate, no problem. And it's turning images into actionable evidence, right? So it's saying, as that car goes by, we're going to capture that information, and it's going to be recorded in the database. And for 30 days, you can search about that car, and you can get a return that's going to tell you the location of that car over those 30 days. And when we talk about locations, flock cameras, a lot of people feel like, hey, they're placed in my neighborhood, maybe because it's a poorer neighborhood, or it's placed on Main Street because that's where all the crime happens. No, the truth is, when you implement a flock system, you can do calculations in which you capture the most traffic. And so by placing different cameras around the city in different locations, you can capture, like, let's say 95% of the traffic going through town, or maybe 90%. They have different goals based on however many cameras you want to put up. And so what we saw in Denver is that we would see more of the cameras in areas that maybe were on a grid function. And then if you had a more suburban type neighborhood with one entrance in and one entrance out, well, you really only need one flock camera going into that area. So don't read a lot about what they're there, just know that it's a mass surveillance technology on that. So what I also then go to is, what does Flock sell when you go to the website? What are they telling agencies? What are they telling potential retail customers in that? They're kind of selling access to law enforcement in a way on the website. I don't like it, but they do sell their product. But it talks about how that footage of vehicle data can easily be shared with law enforcement. And one of the things they'll do as a local establishment is they will open up sharing with that law enforcement agency. As far as I understand, when the right settings are put in by the police department, it's not a one-to-one sharing back and forth with retail agencies, because we absolutely don't want private data going back to retail agencies, but those are settings that have to be watched. The other thing is the next two that are a little more scary, because it talks about where it's going. And that is spot patterns that signal risk. And then also unlock operational and marketing insights. So what that tells us is this is a little bit more than a data set. And that's where we start learning that Flock is implementing artificial intelligence and translation behind these images. So once an image is collected from a Flock camera, it is then sent over the cellular system, and it is sent to a database. And as that image is read into the database, that's where the 1,000 search terms come from. And it's, the Flock CEO, Garrett, has described it as, if you can see it with your eyes, you can search it in Flock. So descriptions of cars, things like that. You can start using plain language to look for the cars, but they're also advertising that they're spotting patterns. And so they're starting to get predictive with a machine on where crime might happen or suspicious activity. In this case, they talk about it being linked to package theft. And that, so with that, if you ever want to know where something's going, it's good to look into the patents. And so with this is how we know how the system kind of works. Is this right here represents the camera itself. It's sent over the cellular network, and then it is got object detection. It searches through it. It triggers an alert if maybe that's a stolen car and a stolen car list. But the other thing is the historical analysis module. And that, so basically, in their patent, they are, they're saying that they're running an analysis on this software. So it's not just a picture, not just a picture that is searched, but behind that, as the patent would say, they're starting to run analysis on that and giving predictions to what the actions of a person driving a car might be based on previous locations where that car's been, and that over the last 30 days. And the 30-day mark is really something that is in law enforcement. We don't know with private companies how long they're holding that data, because the CEO of a retail company might say, well, I want to keep that data for 2 years, it's minimal cost, and now we can search that data for 2 years to stop retail theft or predict retail theft in this case. The other thing that I like to point out in the patent is it says, using the neural network module configured to identify different classes of people, male, female, race, etc. And then below it also says for identifying clothing type, jacket, pants, short, hat, etc. For gauging height and weight. So now when you got on the transparency portal, the Cheyenne police say, like, in their transparency portal, they're very clear that they don't capture that information. Yes.
Is that the camera our police use?
That is the patent.
The one that takes pictures of people in pants and shorts? I don't think that's the camera you use.
They likely use Falcon, and that can do this.
Yeah.
It's not sold as that feature.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think we do that, Julie.
But yeah, so that's, but this is the patent for, like, this is the patent related to the camera.
But that's not the camera we use.
Can we hold the questions until after the presentation, please?
I don't know. I've been told what the rules are.
Okay. Yeah, but like I
That's not
said,
the camera we use.
Sir, please.
it is. That's the patent for the camera you use. Now, I'm not saying you use every single function that's in the patent, but that's the patent for the camera you use. So, moving on. Thank you. Moving on with it. On that, what I'd like to say is, in the conspiracy theories, this isn't born out of somebody wanting to go in and collect race data and do that. This is not unique. If you read through this part of the patent, it's going to sound an awful lot like a neighborhood watch training, right? When they train you to, in a neighborhood watch program, they talk about things that you want to get if you're reporting a crime in progress or a crime that happened. And it's kind of this list. And as an understanding of the cameras, that's really where this camera originated from, is the CEO of DeFlock lived in suburban Atlanta. They were having some crime issues. I think it was upwards of 2 package thefts a month, as they would say, and he talks about that on average. But he was in the feeling that you could eradicate crime if you captured the proper information. And so hence he created a device that was basically a automated neighborhood watch device. So designed to sit at the beginning of the neighborhood. And in the early iterations, and as they sell this to HOAs, one of the things they offer is you don't want data to be confusing, so you eradicate all of the license plates that belong to the people that live in the neighborhood. And now you just track the people that come into the neighborhood from the outside. And then if you know what time your package was stolen via a camera or just when they said it arrived, then now you can research the vehicles that entered and exited the neighborhood at that time and capture a suspect. So that's the use case that it was originated from. And then as it got bigger and bigger, and they found that police forces were saying, like, maybe we want to implement that technology a little more broadly rather than just having it in HOAs so we can capture similar information. Then they started selling that to police departments, and that's where it kind of evolved into a mass surveillance versus a neighborhood surveillance. And with that, then they started adding additional intelligence behind that and with the AI. So on that, what I'd like to introduce here, because I think it leads to any type of legislation that we are asking for is there's different types of AI, and some are scarier than others. But as we go forward, asking our civic leaders to address things in this system, we'll talk to a little bit of these types of AI. So we have predictive and generative. Predictive AI is basically statistical analysis. So it takes and it looks for trends, it looks for repeated functions. One of the cases where crime was solved in Aurora, Colorado, using Flock, what they had done is this predictive AI type analysis. They had a car that where somebody was killed in a vehicle accident in that car, and using the analyzing trends, they found that that car had been in front of another car several times for a couple of days, going through different intersections. And then when they researched it, they found out that there was a connection between the two cars, and they were able to solve the crime on it. So that's one of the instances where they've used like predictive AI with the Flock system and got a good result. Generative AI, that's going to be, in theory, it creates content. Hopefully there's no generative AI going on with Flock, because generative AI is more like your ChatGPT, where you're asking it to create a picture of a raccoon building a dam or something like that. But it tends to be more on the creative side, or it answers, you can ask like ChatGPT for its opinion on something and it'll give it, but it's just generating that from its data. The one that's really scary, and I encourage people to watch out for as we're using these types of technology, is agentic AI. And the reason it's called agentic AI is because it's given agency to make decisions. And one of the things we really don't want, especially on a system like this that has data for 30 days, you don't want an AI system being run against it to start to look at what crimes you might have committed, or maybe are you acting in an inappropriate way. My feeling is that government tends to be entrepreneurial at times, and we'll go look for ways to generate money. We don't want to start plugging agentic AI into the sensor systems we have, looking for additional crimes. Now, what I will say again, just because we want to keep all the truth out there, is that that type of use is strictly prohibited in the Cheyenne police policy. So in that, they are, again, better than average on addressing these types of issues versus what we've seen from maybe other police departments. So now, what's a good method for addressing technology implementation in the community? So when we talk about things where we're scared, or I don't want to say scared, maybe that's not the right term, but if we have concerns that technology is starting to infringe on our rights, or is maybe starting to become a little big brother or overbearing, how do we address that, and how do we have a meaningful conversation about that? And kind of the best way we do that in my consulting gigs is we set up a responsibility matrix. And so I put together kind of a proposed responsibility matrix to help direct your concerns to the right locations where they can have effect, and where they're actually going to be like a meaningful conversation. So first off, I put on their police department leadership. So their portion on the responsibility matrix when it comes to implementing technology is pretty simple. Is they need to determine if it'll help them do police stuff better. And I know that's a really a broad simplification of their procurement process, but basically, when it comes to the police, they have a very specific job, and they want to try and do that better. The second part of it is because they are wanting to implement the technology, they need to prepare an implementation policy, or a policy for the use of that technology. Both of those things are done, And then the other responsibilities that come with that is transparency, transparency in the policy and transparency in the cost. And that, but what I would say is there's two things I want to, well, actually I'll make 3 points related to police and this technology. Number one, if you have issues with the police department and you think that maybe they're not acting appropriately, technology is not the place to have that argument, right? Because on top of flock cameras, they have SWAT cars, guns, and other things. If you have issues with the police, you need to address that, right? Directly with the police. Address that core issue. Don't make it a technology issue. So the one thing is with that, you got a class police department. Don't try to take out your frustrations with how you got a last speeding ticket on the technology implementation they're looking for the department. The second thing I would say about that is I also wouldn't expect your police department to do like a constitutional review on things like that. They're really looking, is it legal to implement in our area? If it's legal to implement and it's going to help us, we need to ask for it. And you want technology to keep being brought forward. So with that, I think in this case it was appropriate. And then the very last thing, which maybe you don't get the question as much in Cheyenne as I do down in Denver, but I get asked, the police don't share information with ICE, but they know that this company does work with ICE. Why are they willing to do work and give contracts to a company that works with ICE? And that's kind of the last area I want to caution everybody in, is that you don't want your police department making those moral issues. Because while you may agree with them on this one, you're not going to agree with them on the next one. And so what you want to make sure your police department is implementing things fairly. And so I think it's I will say it's an unfair request to ask your police department to make an ethical decision on a technology that they're utilizing. Right? They need to just know if does it follow the law and does it help them do police work. So in that regard, I think one of the nice things as I looked through your transparency portal and as I did that, all those things were done in the city, and that's a good thing. So now the next thing that it comes to is city leadership, right? And that's really where we need to ask the question from like the city attorney's office or even your city council is the technology legal to implement? Does it infringe on rights? Does it match the values of the community? Is it going to make the community better? And then the other policy, and this is something where that we don't do well in America. And as I talk to foreign counterparts, we don't enact a lot of legislation when we can to control these things. Because when we look at a policy, it's kind of a norm, right? This policy is relatively easy to change. And if it's not legally bound, then you really, like the next city administration, the next police chief, they can change that policy. So while the police might set up an appropriate and a good policy, it's also important to start bounding these technologies with legislation. Yes, sir?
I thought you were a technology expert.
Come on, man. Okay. What
Okay.
Mr. Seagrave, can we
question do
please?
you want answered?
Hold on a second. We have 3 other speakers. It is on me that I did not say that we will have 4 speakers. We're trying to keep the speakers at 15 to 20 minutes per presentation. This is already on 1.5 hour per presentation. We would ask so that we can end in a timely manner that you keep your questions to the end. Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, so with that, the last thing is, it is incumbent upon city leadership to assess any risk that this technology creates for the community members, right? Whether whether that's in data security or that really falls onto city leadership. And then with that, other responsibilities related to it would be to solicit the correct amount of community input based on the impact of this to the community, to discuss technologies and risks in a public forum. That's what we're doing tonight. I think also that you'll find that maybe that is being discussed throughout town here. I've heard that there's been radio shows and things where folks have participated from the city. And then the last thing is to ensure that all policy and legislation is followed through with an independent review, right? So it's a matter of if the police leadership prepare a good implementation policy and a good policy regarding use of the system. And for example, in the policy in Cheyenne, they say every single inquiry has to have a case number. It's the city leadership's job to go in with somebody that has access to that information to go in and audit that and make sure that those policies are being followed and make sure that two-factor authentication is being used if that's part of the policy. So it's incumbent upon city leadership to make sure that those aren't just words. And the last thing is, what do we do as citizens, right? Number one is hold city leadership accountable to their review responsibilities on technology and to ensure policy and legislation audits are being performed, right? Ask how they're being performed, check on those things. Lastly, going to the other responsibilities, and these sound pretty straightforward and over again, is vote. Make sure that if your rights are being impacted as a citizen, that you vote to preserve those rights. The second thing is don't let your leadership erode your rights.
That's right.
Without letting them know about it. And so there's a long pathway in this in the city of Cheyenne to say, if you have concerns, you need to take them to your city leadership, right? And that's just an outsider opinion, that your police department's kind of done what would be required of them in the responsibility matrix. So listen to what they have to say, understand it better as to why they're doing it. But if you don't like this technology, you need to make sure your city leadership knows about it. You need to talk about if that erodes your Fourth Amendment rights to search. And what I'll say is, on this, like flock camera, the Falcon cameras that you guys use, they have both a regular video type camera and an infrared camera. At this point with the technology, the infrared camera is simply used, especially as it's darker outside, to add some clarity to the photo that is taken with the regular camera and do that. But what I would say is these sensors are in their infancy. And while policy prevents searching inside a car from maybe the police department and things like that, as this technology advances, there's not really legislation in place right now to, if you enter a grocery store parking lot, to stop that retailer from searching in your car with every sensor they have, right? And again, I think what we would see right now is, like, as the public cameras are being used, they're facing the back of the car. They're probably not going to be able to tell height, weight, things like that because the seat's in the way. So there are certain things limiting in the way that the current cameras are set up, but we see the patents on where they're trying to get to. And the stated goal of flock security and flock systems is to eradicate crime completely through enforcement. They just say they're going to eradicate crime completely. And you might be able to do that in a small neighborhood. But I think on the whole, we need to understand the limitations of this technology as well and understand what rights we're giving up for that limited effect of technology. So in the end, I like to put together just a statement kind of guiding us as we move forward with that. Take it or leave it, right? But it's, throw this out. The Constitution, which I think everything goes back to, we have to protect our constitutional rights. The Constitution exists to limit the power of the state and preserve the power and rights of the people. When we extend the promise of those protections to everyone, our society goes stronger and more vibrant. However, when we allow anything or anyone to diminish the rights of our neighbors, we ultimately are signing away our own. And in the age of AI, we must be extra vigilant. If we sacrifice a right to an algorithm, not even another person, right? We're sacrificing a right to an algorithm for safety or convenience. That right, it'll be lost forever. Right? And we all want to be safe, and we all don't want to have to be watching out for crime all the time. But if we want to preserve our rights, we also have to take on those responsibilities. Right? And saying I would rather have the individual responsibility than try to replace my individual responsibility with a fancy camera. So with that, that's the end of what I had prepared. So
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Before I announce the next speaker, I will say that I was under the impression that the presentations would be limited to 20 minutes. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance for their question and answers. So once we hit the 20-minute mark, I will be giving you a nod to wrap things up. So our second guest speaker tonight will be Mr. Alan Sheldon. Alan Sheldon is an IT engineering manager and aerospace consultant with nearly 20 years of experience in quality assurance, government regulatory compliance, and technology. He is an advocate for personal liberty, physical conservatism, and a limited government that adheres to the Constitution and is accountable to the public. He will speak about how the technical aspects of the DeFlock surveillance system and how police and other government agencies use this technology to circumvent your rights. Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. The floor is yours.
Yes, so hopefully you can hear me all out there. Actually, wish I had made a presentation for this. I wasn't sure we have a screen. Well, first off, so I'm going to read from this just to stay on track with the 20 minutes. Hopefully it'll be a little less than that, but I want to cover a lot of information. First off, I want to be clear that the information I'm about to cover is based on known information about Flock systems, their features, and the Cheyenne PD may not have access, depending on the contract and licensing, to all of these features. So I just want to put that out there to make sure we know that. That said, unless the city has a very unusual contract with Flock, the data privacy concerns that I'm going to talk about are still very valid. I'd also like to state up front that I have a lot of respect for the Cheyenne PD, Chief Francisco, and I was part of the Police and Community Together group for about 12 years, was also named something previously before that, under both Chief Kozak and Chief Francisco, and I wouldn't have remained involved that long if it weren't an excellent department. So I just want to get that out of the way before, so it's not an attack on police, because it's absolutely not what it's meant to be. There's a lot of information that I mentioned, so I'm going to read off these notes just to stay on track. None of what I have in my notes came from an AI source, despite all the AI machine learning we're going to talk about. And no AI of any type was used to write these notes. So what are Flock cameras and related technologies? So Flock safety, sometimes called Flock systems, Flock, they've got a bunch of different names, DBAs they go under. There we go, let's try that better. They go under several different names. They claim that these are just automatic license plate readers. And in our implementation to see, that's mostly what they are. But they're much more than that in general. They record and analyze anything that's in their field of view. That includes vehicle license plates, but it also includes any stickers on the car, vehicle damage, vehicle customizations. Flock calls this vehicle printing, which John alluded to, vehicle fingerprinting. Beyond that, it captures people that are in the frame, what they're wearing, their physical characteristics, and also signs or anything else that can be categorized by the AI or machine learning system. So if I say AI ML, that's what I mean, is AI and then machine learning. They're different, and if you guys have questions about that, I can describe the difference. The system is tied into the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, as well, and any hits from the hot list will trigger an immediate alert to federal agencies. There are some limits cities can put in place, but behind the scenes, a lot of that is automatic. And I've reviewed 3 contracts, and all of the contracts say that. So having not read ours, I can't say for 100% certain, but it's been in every contract I have read. Video and stills are taken by the camera and sent back to the Flock servers, where they are processed by AI and machine learning, categorized and stored. The individuals with access to the system can enter search strings, and the system will display any images or video that contain what the system thinks is a match, along with available metadata, including the location, time and date, and anything else that was captured at that time. What gets captured by Flock cameras, depending on how the units are positioned, positioning it higher up can compromise the accuracy of it because it's further away from licenses and other things, but allows a broader view and to capture more of the street. So kind of some technology was alluded to in one of the questions earlier. There are a bunch of these cameras that are used by various cities. My understanding is that our city currently only uses Flock Falcon. So those are an array of LPR, license plate reader cameras, that by default do not provide video through but their technology under the hood operates with a video feed. So a lot of people are saying, oh, they just take pictures, but really what they do is they take a snippet of video, and from that, machine learning decides what is the most focused, what has the best readability for whatever it's looking for, and theoretically can even stack those images to reduce noise. And then it's processed through the system to identify what's in the field of view. But an agency can, and presumably for paying an extra fee, integrate what's called LPR video integration to enable video and possibly audio recording. It depends on the generation of the camera, to the system. So you can have the older cameras, and depending on their revision and their hardware status, they could record video for sure, but they may or may not be able to record audio. Falcon Condor, I don't believe these are used here, but a lot of businesses are using these, other cities are using these, are automated PTZ cameras that record video by default. They're able to track and zoom in on vehicles and persons traversing the area automatically. And there's different settings in it that they can use for those. When the breach, which Flock denies occurred, happened, there's videos on YouTube you can find where people actually were in the feed of a PTZ camera in one of the cities, observing one of the strollways, or like a greenway like we have, with people walking in and out, and it zoomed in on a woman and actually followed her for a while before switching to a man. So this technology is part of their suite. We may or may not have that in our contract, but it's definitely possible. And when I get to the back end of the system, you'll see why that is important to know. Flock Raven, newer cameras, and the dedicated units can also record audio. The system processes this data along with other inputs. And like I said, Flock calls this product Raven, and the initial case was a gunshot detection. But now, with newer features, it can actually record and analyze other sounds like public conversations that happen near the units. Some of these units are placed in parks, parking lots. As we talked about, businesses place them in their parking lots or near their entryways. So the fact that it can record this is important to know. Let's see here. And then this latest feature is referred to by Flock as human distress detection. And that was reported by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Not all of this stuff has made it onto Flock marketing sites for the public to view. Raven detections can automatically alert police depending on the product and licensing that's in place. And then we're getting into why that's important. So Flock Nova, sometimes also referred to as Flock OS. They are technically different products, but they're very similar. And they do similar things. They're implemented in similar ways. It's an all-in-one platform that combines Flock's technology suite and data into a single portal. The user can type in a name, phone number, plate, address, and we assume a photo at some point in the future, into a search field, and all available information, including past locations, LPR detections, which is your license plate detections, emergency calls, firearm possession or ownership if known. So that's a critical caveat. Not every district will release that information into the system. Criminal records, related video footage, and public records can be displayed all at once. This you can see on their website if you actually go to this right now. The AI system can use AI and ML to connect the dots between crimes. That's actually also noted on their website directly, almost a verbatim quote. The system is designed to facilitate collaborations across jurisdictions and now has facial recognition technology along with access to ring camera and video and audio due to a new partnership with Amazon. So I'll be clear that Flock claims at this moment that they do not have facial recognition technology implemented in their core product. However, Amazon does, and their partnership with Amazon is bilateral in many ways. And so there are technologies that can come in, and also facial recognition technology is actually really easy to implement anyway. So as I'll describe as we go further on, the data that's aggregated and maintained by Flock, even after the 30-day period that the police are allowed to access through their contract has elapsed, they can still process certain things and data, they keep video and photos for basically as long as they want. It depends on the contract exactly how they can use it, but most of the contracts state it the same way, and that's what I'll describe here. So data control. Despite what the Flock CEO says about agencies owning the content, all video and audio resides on Flock servers, and customers can access the data from a web portal via an app on their phones or tablets, or through a computer that's connected just through a normal browser. Flock says that the data can be time limited, and in fact, as John mentioned in the portal, we do have limits in place, 30 days, which is the default. But that's really just a software limitation in the default. The agency can pay for and retain data longer, and in fact, Flock, even through their contracts, implies that they will keep data for much longer. The CEO of Flock has said that they provide tools to help organizations comply with state laws, but it's not their job to monitor police uses of the system other than reporting search audits. Flock has the ability to limit to resolve issues when they're made aware of misuse. But unfortunately, there's no feature that automatically alerts agency staff when an employee may be misusing the systems. Audits must be performed proactively by the agency right now. Flock maintains aggregated data, which is the term they use in almost all contracts I've reviewed, that they own, and they can rent that back to organizations. It doesn't even have to be the original organization that first gathered it. They have the right to retain, subject to specific contractual agreements, so-called aggregated data, which they may rent back to the agency or other agencies. This includes a clause that grants Flock and I'm quoting now, non-exclusive, perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free, fully paid license to use, reproduce, modify, and distribute the, in parentheses, city or agency data as part of the aggregated data. They have the right to collect and analyze the data. They may not sell the data in most contracts that I've read, but nothing prevents them from sharing it. I apologize, we've got to change here real quick. So transparency. Flock has aggressively fought transparency after several FOIA requests for audit logs released data showing that the police misuse the system. Now, this is not our police. This was other police departments nationally. They've also attacked organizations like DeFlock.me, which was mentioned earlier and which I'll talk about later, which shows where Flock cameras are located. It's a crowdsourced program. So people that identify the cameras are able to place them into the system. They also get some data from cities that release that information, and then they enter that in. The CEO referred to these organizations as terroristic organization. After the data came out showing police misuse, Flock changed their audit policies to exclude officers' names, plate data, vehicle fingerprint, and the text search data used to initiate the search. Basically, everything an investigator would need to determine that abuse took place. Flock realizes that the public is becoming aware of the privacy implications of their systems, so they have been trying to claim that they are being attacked by the same activist groups who want to defund the police, weaken public safety, and normalize lawlessness. That's a direct quote from the CEO. I can say for sure that I want none of those things stated in my initial statements. What I do want, though, is accountability for law enforcement and for this gross violation of the Fourth Amendment to be discontinued nationwide, at least until new technologies and legal frameworks can be placed to protect the public. The CEO is, with these statements, is trying to poison the well by using arguments designed to appeal to law-abiding people and make them second-guess the importance of their constitutional rights, and implore you not to fall into that trap. Security vulnerability. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier. While Flock has claimed that they have never been hacked, several cybersecurity researchers were able to gain access to Flock safety systems access to around 80,000 cameras last year due to poor system security. There were YouTube videos made in partnership with these researchers where the YouTubers themselves were actually able to use live Flock cameras. We assume based on what they were that they were actually the PTC cameras in this case to actually record sections of their videos. Imagine if a nefarious actor gained access to that data instead of privacy-focused researchers. This data, by the way, was available in HTTP, which is non-encrypted, available to the internet, and was searchable on websites, search engines that specialize in finding and searching for IoT, Internet of Things. So pretty much anyone could do that. We don't know exactly how many people actually were watching those streams, but it basically presents like a web camera in your browser for those ones. Now, presumably they have taken steps to secure this, but the fact that so much information was gleaned from this kind of helped expose some of the stuff that they were doing behind the scenes they hadn't admitted to yet. So there are already discussions about integrations with Palantir. That's through intermediary, actually one of the main funders of the original flocking implementation. And organizations that federal governments hope will give them a digital all-seeing eye. And that's actually what government officials actually have said, even under the Trump administration, which I support. So why is this dangerous? Many of you are probably thinking of ways that this technology could help law enforcement, and you're not entirely wrong. But ask yourself, if you really trust the government to have what amounts to an oracle using data that was collected without a warrant and before any crime was actually committed. AI and machine learning technology is not infallible. Almost everybody here has probably used an AI where it's hallucinated something or presented some data that was incorrect. My company's been trying to get us to actually use AI for various things, including mission critical, but just to aid our work. And I'll tell you, when I actually tried to use it for a project literally about 3 weeks ago, it hallucinated almost everything critical. And so it had to be thrown away and gone. And the technology is this powerful is prone to abuse, and it has been. And in fact, there has been many documented cases of abuse by agencies all over the country. Privacy advocates often focus on the constitutional violations and the privacy implications, but it's just important to talk about the safety implications. There have been many so-called flock hits that resulted in wrong individuals being stopped in traffic and held at gunpoint, and innocent people having SWAT teams surround their homes. That actually happened recently in Florida. In Arkansas recently, also a bad flock hit resulted in a trooper rear-ending a lady in her Tahoe, and actually, credit to them, he was, basically, I think he was laid off or at least put on long-term leave while they investigated that. So we don't have time to go into all the cases of these systems, but these systems can be a major threat to law-abiding citizens who may just be at the wrong place at the wrong time. We already know that people and agencies are starting to abdicate responsibility to AI technology. Many police departments now use AI transcriptions. It's not necessarily a flock service. Some of them are made by Axon or Motorola that are able to complete reports using the body cam audio. They've already been caught filing reports without checking them that literally said outrageous things like a suspect turned into a banana. It was a recent thing. The technology, I was talking about hallucinations, and there was one. The technology is not ready for prime time, and the legal frameworks that exist are not developed enough to protect the public from misuse. Multiple lawsuits are currently working their way through the system, but currently these cameras operate in a federal gray area due to the fact that technology has evolved faster than protective legislation. So what can you guys do about this? Well, being here is a good start. Once you leave, you can do your own research and stay up to date with what Flock and local police, neighborhoods, and businesses are doing with the technology. There are several channels on YouTube which cover Flock-related technology. Some examples are Ben Jordan and 404 Media, Business Reform, which he's a former legislator and engineer, and Louis Rossman, which is mostly known for his work with Right to Repair. You can support legislation like the bill that Daniel Singh's going to discuss this evening, and you can email and call your city councilors and request that they vote to remove flock cameras from the city immediately and end contracts after they expire. And you should consider installing DeFlock.me app on your phone so that you can know where flock cameras are located. And right now, as of today when I checked, there's 24 listed, and I was told by somebody that there may be several more of those that are unlisted. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. And our third speaker tonight will be Mr. Exie Brown. Exie Brown is a retired Chief Master Sergeant who served 22 years in the U.S. Air Force. Through the first 8 years of his career, he served in law enforcement and security, conducting aircraft and nuclear security, base law enforcement, as well as serving on emergency service teams and tactical response force teams. He has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Exie is a huge supporter of our law enforcement community and appreciates the need to utilize necessary tools to conduct law enforcement duties effectively and efficiently. As a staunch advocate for protecting our constitutional rights, Exie understands there needs to be a balance between safety and individual liberty. He joins us today to have a productive dialogue protecting our civil liberties and our community. Mr. Brown.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you first off, everybody, for being here tonight. And I appreciate the community members that come out to kind of get a little bit more educated on what the flock system is and get some more information that you can take back and research and look for yourself on what these systems do. And by the way, I hate podiums, so that's why I took the mic and walking around a little bit. I also want to thank our community leaders, members of our city council. We also have some legislators for being here and members from our Cheyenne Police Department. Thank you guys for being here. You know, throughout the first 8 years of my career, what we always did, and what every law enforcement agency does, is we always look for ways that we can do our jobs more effectively and more efficiently. What tools can we use that are going to help enhance investigations and solve crimes and deter crimes from happening? And those are all great things that we try to do, that they try to do all the time, to make sure that the public is safe and that they can do their jobs effectively. Now, when I first heard about this flock system a couple years ago, I looked into it a little bit just because I was curious, even though I've been out of the career field for quite a while. I looked into it because I really was curious, what do these systems do? And on the surface, looking at it, that it was a license plate reader, that it will assist law enforcement in solving crimes. I tell you what, at first I was like, man, this is great technology. I really like what they're doing with this. However, the further I started digging into what the flock camera system's capabilities are, that's where I started getting really concerned. Because it starts getting to the point where do we draw the line between safety and infringing on our Fourth Amendment constitutional right? So when I was looking at it, when I started seeing that it ain't just a license plate reader, even though it's advertised as license plate reader, it can create an AI digital profile of your vehicle. And as both of the previous speakers said, it doesn't just read your license plate. It can identify bumper stickers, a scratch, dents, luggage racks, and so on. And that's where a lot of the issues that I was starting to think, like, okay, how are we now turning into like a surveillance state where you can surveil, you can track where that vehicle is, where it has been, and where it's going. And with what Mr. Sheldon was talking about earlier, with the contract with Amazon, potentially you could be tracked from your front door if you have a Ring camera, or if your neighbors have a Ring camera, you can be tracked from your neighbor's house to anywhere you go in town. This can be shared interagency if the system allows it to, or if the permissions are allowed to. It can be crossed across state lines if the system is allowed to. Now, and I'm not going to talk for the 20 minutes because I'm not one that likes to be long-winded. I'm only going to talk here for a few on the stuff because I don't want to continue to repeat what all the previous speakers said. But where we come into some more issues is that there's so many loopholes when it comes to sharing across agencies that the previous two talked about. There have been several different audits where this could be hacked. And I look at it not only from a personal privacy standpoint, but I also look at it from a force protection, anti-terrorism standpoint. You get a bad actor, a terrorist, an extremist group that can get the ability to tap into these systems, that can cause a lot of serious problems. And especially if they can track your movements, what your habits are, where your travel habits are going, where you've been and where you're at, that poses a serious threat. Not only just from your constitutional rights, from that standpoint, it also for your safety and when it comes to thwarting terrorism. Now, there's been some arguments that I've seen out there when it comes to, well, do you have privacy in public? And the argument was that you don't have privacy in public. And I push back on that because if you get pulled over, say if it's just for a simple speeding ticket or you ran a stop sign, if you get pulled over, that law enforcement officer does not have the right to search your vehicle without probable cause, consent, or a warrant. So you do have some level of privacy when it comes to driving around. And again, it brings the question, what about your freedom of travel? What about your freedom to travel about, to move about your community, to move about your state, across the U.S.? Where's that? That's what I would beg the question on. Another argument that was posed out there is that, well, you're under constant surveillance. You go to a store, you go to an ATM, you go to a gas station, you're going to be on camera. They're going to have cameras there. Yes, they are private businesses, private owners that are using cameras to ensure, to see if anybody is stealing something and security and theft out of their location. However, in order for law enforcement to obtain that video, they have to get A, consent from the business owner or somebody with the authorization to give consent, or they have to have a warrant to obtain them. Flock camera systems like this is warrantless surveillance. You are watched, they can take your picture, or they can track your movements wherever you go. That's warrantless surveillance. And so I think there needs to be a lot of safeguards and guardrails that are put on rules for the use of these cameras. And it was brought up a little bit ago about some incidences where these cameras have been misused. Now, I fully trust our law enforcement here in Laramie County and in Cheyenne. As a matter of fact, I served with several members that were members of the Cheyenne PD. And I believe one member who is the deputy sheriff. And I trust him completely. But in every organization, even whether it was the military, police departments, you always have those few bad actors. And two examples. In Kansas, there were 2 instances that happened where the police chief and another law enforcement officer, 2 separate incidents that they were using the flock system and getting into the flock system to stop their ex-wives. Now, fortunately, both were apprehended and charged and fired, but those are some of the vulnerabilities you have. And you look at the future. You have to look at the future of these things because you're not going to have the same people in the department. You're not going to have the same leaders in office. You have to look down the road because the policies you put in place are the policies that other people who replace those leaders will be utilizing or could change and implement. So you got to think about with the way technology is operated and the way technology is advanced over just in the last 20 years. Technology has advanced so much more in the last 20 years than it had the previous 100 years before. And you start to think, and you have to ask yourself, what, with the advance of technology, do I need to start paying attention to when it comes to my rights? And that's where we, as the public, have to be very vigilant. We have to pay attention. We have to be engaged. We have to be involved. Because the way technology is advancing, it can violate your rights, and your rights can slowly start getting picked away with the technology. It's not like back in the 80s or the 90s where somebody personally will come up and whether it's a government official, law enforcement officer, or policies being made that will violate your rights. No, now you have technology with camera systems, voice recorders, AI, you name it. We have to be a lot more vigilant when it comes to our rights. So, one thing I'm going to leave you with here is that, Ben Franklin, he stated, and he warned to us, that those who are willing to trade liberty for safety deserves neither. And these flock systems, they threaten, they have threats to privacy, and I believe we need to kind of put a pause on our flock system here until we get some legislation put into place to where we can have those safeguards and those sideboards that give a definite guidance on how to implement and utilize these things and to make sure that there are definite repercussions for those who violate that. So again, I want to thank you guys very much for being here today. I hope we have some more engaging conversation. Again, like I said, I don't talk very much. I don't talk lengthy. And I also want to leave it open for a lot of questions here later on. So I do thank everybody for being here. Thank you to our leaders, law enforcement, legislators who are in the room, and for all you guys for showing up to learn more about the system, learn more about how you can be vigilant, and making sure that your rights are protected. So thank you all.
Thank you. Our fourth guest speaker tonight is Representative Daniel Singh. Representative Singh represents House District 61 in Cheyenne and serves as chairman of the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovation Technology. He works on artificial intelligence and emerging technology policy in the Wyoming House, focusing on how new tools can be adopted responsibly while protecting constitutional rights, individual liberty, and public trust. Representative Singh.
Probably should have. Nope. There we go. Hello. All right. Probably should have told Exie not to put that up there, but thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thank you, Kathy, for organizing this, and Rick for being willing to moderate this. Thank you, members of the City Council, Mr. Mayor, Chief Francisco, and members of the police force here in town, as well as my fellow legislators. This is an emerging issue that appears to be coming from all sides of the aisle, not just both sides, all sides of the aisle, that folks are concerned about how information obtained by recording devices and artificial intelligence is used in relations to public safety. And first and foremost, I want to make it absolutely clear that I am not accusing our local law enforcement of abusing this technology. And frankly, after looking and reviewing their current policies that they have, I think they've done a pretty good job as to outlining what specifically this technology should be used for. That being said, and I also don't believe that the City Council in any way, shape, or form is attempting to impose some sort of draconian policy on the people of Cheyenne. And in fact, I believe that they're working to do what's best for our community. And in order to achieve what is best for our community, we need to come together and actually participate in the forum to make sure that everybody's voices are heard and that the concerns that people have are aired out publicly. And so, again, thank you, Kathy, for making sure that that happens. Right now, so we've heard a lot about the different concerns that people have about this technology with the company DeFlock and how it can be used by a government. And so what I am working on is a piece of legislation in the Wyoming House in the upcoming session to address those concerns. I believe that as new technologies emerge and as society interacts with those technologies, it's up to us to figure out on the spot how they interact with our constitutional rights, with the safety of the public, and we're establishing a precedent for how other technologies will interact with those things as well. And so really the bill that I'm working on right now does a couple of things. It interacts with, or it establishes rules for how governmental entities, it could be a municipal government, it could be a special district, or county, how they implement some sort of policies regarding the biometric data or the type of information that they could obtain from a third party. So we want to make sure that while this technology allows for incredible services to solve real problems, one of the biggest problems that we're dealing with are things like stolen cars, right, and organized crime, how there is crime in Colorado that is connected to things happening here in Cheyenne, and how those different entities interact with each other. You could have a car that's stolen in Cheyenne, get taken into Denver, and get sold on the black market. And that's just the reality of our interconnected states. It could be how your personal location, your location data, as it has to do with cell phones and the fact that we carry in our pocket something that tracks every one of our movements throughout the day. And sometimes we forget about that, or the biometric data that has to do with the shape of your face. That's things that are we take for granted in things like our cell phones. All of those data points are personal information, and we don't have a written policy about how we interact with those different pieces of personal information. So what this piece of legislation that I'm working on needs to establish is how different governments are able to interact with that information, how they're able to install the type of technology that actually will collect something like that. So we heard about automatic license plates readers. We want to limit how many of these types of surveillance type systems are actually able to be put in by the government itself, and what an individual citizen is able to do if the government crosses that line that we're letting it stand right now. And so it's not so much that we all need to work together in order to find a solution when it comes to these new technologies. And I'm thankful that the city council is here and the law enforcement is here as well, because they want to be part of the conversation. Well, they would not be here, I would not be here if we did not care about the rights of everyone. And when I drove here today, I passed one of these cameras, and somehow I got a red light with every stop that I passed. I'm not saying they're connected necessarily, but all that is to say that there is a way that we can responsibly implement technology. We can outline our rights, and we can move forward together in a way that sets a precedent for other technologies as they come along the road. And so I know we're running short on time.
You're good.
Well, I wanted to open it up to any questions. There were questions coming earlier, but just know that we're actively working on this piece of legislation that gives some guidance for the municipalities and any other form of government within the state of Wyoming. And it's not in an effort to delegitimize the work and policies that are actively in place, but rather to set a standard throughout the state.
Thank you, Representative Singh. We have 45 minutes before the library closes. If I could ask the guest speakers to take a seat on the stage here, and I will open up the floor for questions. Why don't you keep that in mind, and I will pass along this mic. And if you would like to ask a question of any of the speakers.
My question, David Nicely. David Nicely, my question is, how could the Cheyenne BD or the Wyoming legislature ensure that once the data is released to the private company under contract or to other law enforcement agencies or any other person, how can they ensure that the data is not misused, or ensure where it, or even know where it goes, let alone ensure that it's not misused?
So I can answer that. So I'd probably propose in the legislation creating language there that requires certain privacy protections in the contracts. This is done nationally in other countries as well. And if an organization wants to operate within the state of Wyoming, if such a bill were passed, they would have to ensure that their system is compliant with that. Another thing I would probably put in, just from an IT standpoint, is the ability for individuals at the state level to conduct audits. And that would probably, those two things would probably help ensure, you probably need a new contract with the state or with the city between them and Flock. But in that new contract, you would specify all these things, or just say, we're not doing it. And if they want the money, they're gonna do it. If they don't, then that solves our problem.
I'd also like to say that, so what I'm working on right now would require a warrant in order to access a lot of this information. So, just making sure this doesn't neuter the ability of law enforcement to access the information necessary to assist in solving a crime, but it does require that we go through the proper mechanisms to ensure that there is not unrestrained access to this information.
Next question.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. And because I have several questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you what, after each question, let's see if somebody else has a question, nobody else has a question, right there.
Great. I'd like to start with John.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. And I liked your statement where most people in Wyoming don't really want to hear from Denver. I applauded that, actually. Talked a lot tonight. You identified yourself as an expert on technology, and yet you went into a lot of different things involving what the city council should do, what the mayor should do, what our responsibilities are. Are you an expert in those areas?
Well, in my career, I've worked as a consultant helping guiding cities. And I don't think I actually said what the city council should do. What I gave you is a responsibility matrix on things that fall under their responsibility and their job duty. I'm not saying what legislation they should implement, and really it's up to them whether they implement bounds on that. But what it is, I think it's a little bit clear. All I want to do is clarify if we have issues, or if you as citizens have issues, really the appropriate place to take those. And really that's through looking at it to say that, the police department has implemented this in a way with what I feel is pretty good policy, but it doesn't mean that extends outside of the police department. And so laying out the responsibilities is saying, like, if you have concerns about this technology, who should address it, right?
So are you, quite a few tonight, you and Mr. Sheldon both talked about the Flock program.
Yes.
In broad terms. Are you trying to say that private business can't use Flock? Because that's kind of what I was hearing, because we certainly don't use the systems that were discussed tonight. The city doesn't. So there was a lot of discussion about Flock and what they can do, how they can identify people and that type of thing. But that's not here. That's not us. So are you saying Walmart or whoever, the mall or something, shouldn't be allowed to use that? Are you asking us to legislate that?
So I think that was covered by others. I don't personally think that. I don't think John thought that either, based on his description. Public businesses can use these technologies. And to get to your point about what the city's doing, I thought I made it clear, but I can reiterate that a lot of what was discussed here was not so much what our city is currently using, but what the underlying data can and will be used for. So we can control certain policies of where the information is released within that 30 days, the identified data. But the de-identified, the quote, de-anonymized data, or the anonymized data, that information is retained by Flock and used for any manner of things.
But that doesn't affect us here.
Well, it does affect us, because every person who drives around in our streets is going to end up in that data. And as soon as, like for instance, let's say you de-identify somebody, right? A lot of people feel assured by de-identification policies. But in IT, it's actually, depending on the amount of data available, actually pretty easy to re-identify someone. And as you get more advanced AI, and especially with facial recognition, the vehicle fingerprinting, the free form that they have, which is basically anything that's not a vehicle, identification, you get into a range where you can really easily re-identify somebody from the data that contractually Flock is able to retain perpetually.
But isn't that data available to other companies and other people? I mean, I'm thinking of banking transactions. There's so much data out there about all of us. Why are we so focused on this one thing?
Well, banking transactions are absolutely controlled. Those are controlled by a really strong framework of controls. They are. If you look, I mean, every company has, credit card requirements. They have personally identifiable information controls. There's many, many layers and audits. Every major corporation is audited at least once for that information. They hire people that's their specialty to maintain that information, the security of that system, and the audit trail.
And yet we hear about violations all the time.
Yeah, well, it's going to happen.
All the time.
But the reason this is important is because this is the sort of thing that large governments want to have access to. Palantir, which is effectively a funder of this company.
Mr. Druitt, have you read the city's contract with Flock and what?
No, I actually am trying to get that, but I have read 3 others, and they are all almost identical except for the earliest one, which was very early in Flock's.
But you haven't read ours yet.
I haven't yet, and I would like to.
Okay.
And that's why I
You
caveat.
got it right here.
Okay, I will definitely take a look at it. But that's why I also caveated at the very beginning that, this is not necessarily to say your exact implementation, but I'd be surprised unless you have a very unusual contract that's more restrictive, that these things couldn't apply behind the scenes.
John, did you read our contract with Flock?
I have not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown, have you read it?
No, I have not. I would like to have a copy of this.
And Mr. Representative Singh, have you read it?
I have not read the city's contract with Flock.
Thank you very much.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah. My name is Tom Seagrave. I'm the president of the Cheyenne City Council.
One of my counselors.
Yeah, one thing I will comment is we're asking about the rights of private businesses to do things on their property. And I definitely am a proponent of business rights, but I also believe there needs to be disclosure. And stating things like, if your bank is sharing your information too widely, it's time to change banks, right? And then with private businesses, we have a choice. And maybe that regulation needs to increase if we're talking about a monopoly like an energy company or the water department. They should have a tighter standard because they're a monopoly and we don't have a choice but to do business with them. But I think it's really important that everybody understands the capabilities of this technology so you can make a choice when you go to Lowe's, right? They're known for implementing this nationwide. If you go to Lowe's, to know what they're doing. And the difference between the city government and Lowe's is I can decide to buy my plywood somewhere else. But with the city, as a citizen, you have to be involved. And
Can I? And thank you, Mr. Seagrave, for being here and asking these questions. The fact of the matter is that when Cheyenne implements a policy and when we incorporate a new technology into how we do things in our city, the rest of the state looks at that and follows our lead. And so I think it's important now that we nip this in the bud and establish how, as a state, we deal with this type of technology, this information sharing, and I do think that, again, I think that the city council, the city police department has done a great job in limiting the way that information is collected, and it can serve as a model in the state.
Looks like we have 2 more questions. First one.
My question is, how do you want it? I mean, all this data goes up to Flock servers, okay? Then what do? Who's gonna know? And in 10 years from now, Google was just a search engine at one time. Now Google, is way more than just a search engine. It tracks your every move. How do you keep this in a box? Is what I'm wondering.
That is a serious problem, and we are a public entity dealing with a for-profit business. And so, despite that being a for-profit business offering us the service that we're working with, we, as the public, need to be able to control how that information is shared and what is available and what they're able to sell. And so, I had to interject.
See, yeah, just to add to that, I think that was a good answer. I think there's a couple options. One, you don't use the technology. That's probably better not to open Pandora's box. That would be, as somebody who's worked in IT and really even just been fascinated by it and hobbyist, built my first computer when I was 10. That was over 30 years ago. Had dip switches back then. Technology advances and things that you think you can control. It's the whole AI argument, which I won't get on a tangent from. I mean, some of it was mentioned between the generative AI, which is the underlying technology for agentic AI. It's all evolving, and eventually they're hoping to get, I almost said we, I'm not, but others are hoping that we get to what's called a generalist AI. And that will basically be almost like sentient from a normal person's perspective. And so that's where the technology is headed. And technology advances so quickly that legislation can't do anything but even just try to keep up. And so my policy as somebody who's been more freedom oriented, and especially somebody who knows this technology really well, I can deploy a lot of this technology myself. You really want to play with this carefully. And a lot of organizations think, oh, well, they're sold this stuff. These people want to sell a product. And they want to say, hey, it does this, it gives you these protections. But if you read the contract and you know how the technology works, you know what it's going to do behind the scenes and what it can do. And so, I think legislation can help. Like we talked about, you can put in requirements for data storage, limitations of that, the ability to do audits. A lot of corporations don't like to be audited. And to your second question there, who would do it? Somebody who is specialized in IT and AI.
If they don't let you into the system,
Exactly.
how do you do it?
Right.
And I think we are funding a massive engine that could be used for oppression.
Yeah. Good. Good.
I guess I'm loud enough, I don't need that.
Yeah, and I think like with legislation pieces like Representative Singh is going to be putting forth, that we need to kick that off by making sure that we implement that kind of legislation to safeguard and to be able to audit, and it needs to be pushed up and promoted at the national level too, and have some federal regulation on audits and what data can be shared, what data can be stored, and really put some strict regulation on it to ensure that information data is protected.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is you can write all the regulations in the world, but if they don't let you implement them on them, Google is so powerful now that how do you do it? I mean, that's what I worry about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question to answer because they could, even if you had a contractual agreement,
yeah, they don't have to honor it.
They don't have to honor it theoretically. I mean, you could sue them as a state. There's obviously, legal avenues you could follow. But at the end of the day, you'd probably be choosing just to discontinue service and then let the legal stuff play out behind the scenes. And there aren't a lot of options. I mean, Motorola is about to do something similar. Axon wants to do something similar. Palantir is already basically has the whole database, data integration between different organizations, even the data bits that they have themselves. They've said, I think at one time, they want there to be 300, I think it was 14, at least 314 pieces of information on every individual. And so these things, they have a habit of getting out of control faster than you expect. So yeah, I mean, that's why in my statement I said, I think absent a really strong framework, I think our best bet is to just have the city council vote this out and get rid of the technology. When they've done this in other cities, a lot of other cities have actually done this recently. Very few go back. I think only one that I know of is thinking about going back, and you may speak to that more. I think Boulder was saying something about somebody wanted to go back. I don't know if they're going to be able to. Yeah, so they're talking about it, but I think there's going to be a public outcry. Yeah. So, but Flock has been caught after cameras were out of contract, actually going and reactivating the cameras. And so those cities actually went out and put black tape over the lenses before they could actually be removed by city staff. So it is one of those things where, I think we really should look at this. And even if it is temporary, say you can, put some framework in that actually might work, maybe we could bring it back. I prefer as a more libertarian oriented person not to have that. But, there is a use case for this technology. I know if I had offered one time to Chief Francisco to be either a volunteer or part-time crime analyst for them when I was part of that group. They declined my offer, which is fine. I know they wanted to hire someone internally, and I understood the politics of it. So I didn't hold a grudge or anything. But, this is something I would have wanted for that. But, in that mindset, you want tools, you want to have tools, and they always want to have that. I saw a video where they captured a guy today in Arizona with an MRAP a thermal drone and a remote controlled land drone, basically. And I was like, we're supposed to be demilitarizing the police, and yet, some of these areas, but they'll effectively use it. They might effectively use it sometimes. So I understand people want to have the tools they want to have, but at the same time, you can only make a job so easy before you reduce the privacy rights.
I got a question on, so who authorized Cheyenne's cameras to be put in place here? Was it the city council or commissioners or?
I mean, we've got the mayor, but my understanding, when I first saw it, I think it was early in November of 2024, I saw it as a consent agenda item. I'd never seen it pop up anywhere, not talked about. I actually stayed through the meeting to ask about it at the end. I was told that there were concerns that the mayor had and others. But I believe I don't have the notes with me exactly, but I believe it's 2 weeks later it was approved. So, and I believe it's also approved on consent agenda. I would not say that 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Was there any kind of like public notification?
Not really. My statement was the only one I heard at that time. Now, Tom can get a thing here. He's apparently feels strongly about it.
Yes, I do.
Okay, I do want to say that people are jumping in line. We have 2 people queued, so please do not shout out your questions. Flag me, I will put you in the queue. You were specifically called?
It went through standard procedure.
Yeah, sure.
Let me finish. We had a work session on it. The chief presented an hour-long work session on it. It was introduced, it was heard, it went to committee, it came back to the council. So it went through the standard process. There was no funny business about approving it. And I'm offended that you even brought that up.
Well, first of all, I didn't mean to imply that there was any funny business, because that's not what I believe I said. But what I mean is a lot of these high-profile things do make the media, and people do find out. A lot of us work, even as an IT manager, which probably have more flexibility than some people. I'm limited, often cannot attend these meetings. I actually did attend one of the meetings during the lunch hour recently for something that's being discussed with the administrative warrants, but that's the first one I've ever made. So a lot of people are going to make the normal city council meetings, the ones that occur at 6 o'clock. So I didn't mean to imply that there's any funny business. What I meant was the media did not pick up on it. There was no fanfare. No one was talking about it. I simply was attending the meeting for another reason. Specifically, in this case, I believe it was the RV ban or the oversized vehicle ban, and I happened to see it. And so I stayed through knowing what that technology was. I stayed through to talk about it at the end. And that's all I meant to imply. I didn't mean to imply there's funny business. It did go through the normal channels, but it was just unfortunately not picked up widely. And so by the time I did hear about it, it was nearly through. So that's all I meant. Sure.
Sure, and I just wanted to touch on the previous question that the bill that I'm working on creates a private right of action to be able to take action against whatever government entity that there may be a violation of the acquisition of this data. So that is the mechanism to be able to directly challenge that government entity. But, and when it comes to your question, sir, about whether or not it went through the proper channels, yes, it went through the proper channels, and all of these contentious issues go through the proper channels, really, and that really reflects a problem with our public notice system. And that's something that I hold that's a totally separate issue, but I do believe that something is broken in that the public is not able to properly connect the issues that are happening in their own community. But that is totally separate from what we're talking about tonight.
Next question.
Yeah, one of the things that I had a concern over is you guys were mentioning like the privacy issue, like does a citizen have the right to privacy when they go out in public? So a different lens, as a drone operator, there are absolutely laws, or FAA can take complaints. If I'm hovering a drone over somebody, they're driving in their vehicle, maybe it's summer, you're checking out girls in bikinis, whatever. The point is that there's a lot of privacy. I think for the normal citizen, if you want to call me that, is there's an obvious concern here. You guys had also mentioned something about picking up voices or cues or something. Can those things actually be used? So like for instance, if I'm sitting underneath one of these cameras and I'm having a discussion that I want to go punch John Paul in his face, where do we go with that? Now I'm opposed with the DeFlock cameras, but there's a lot of confusion because there is this kind of fine line between when You go out in public, and if I'm holding my phone, I can record you and do what I want. That's my First Amendment right. So the scapegoat, to me, would come from city officials or anybody else, would be, you're giving up that same right. Why are you complaining about flock? So I think that John had mentioned something about kind of catching the sequence, identifying marks, stuff like that. And the last thing I want to say, and I'm just saying this as a citizen, if we have people that are coming here, this is a topic that affects all of us. It's not Democrat versus Republican, left versus right, but I'll be honest, as just a regular citizen, and probably most citizens, they're not educated about what goes on with city council or even our legislation. So we have city council that they're not professionals either. They didn't bring in their flock sponsorship t-shirts. They're offended, I'm offended.
Let me think here. So, and just from my position, I am not, a lot of people don't envy my job. I don't necessarily envy the job of our local government, but we all, I do believe that everyone who is here, everyone who's elected, has stepped forward into that position because they're dedicated to the well-being of our community. And I'm not here to point fingers, but that information and enabling these technologies to collect information, if we don't draw some sort of line in the sand as to how we acquire that information, how we deal with that information, then the precedent is set for future technologies. And AI right now is the least effective AI that will be for the rest of our lives. It is only going to get stronger and more powerful, more integrated, be able to do more things. Soon, the mass implementation of AI that is able to read your lips without any sort of audio input will be widely available and programmable into cameras. And just amongst a plethora of other types of applications of artificial intelligence. But I believe that any technology is a tool for us to use, and it's really our responsibility as to whether or not we use it responsibly, or if we use it in an irresponsible way that tramples on the average citizen. And so we're conscientious of that. That's why we're here.
Yeah, and to go to your question about, the privacy, yeah, when you're in public, yeah, you do give up a little bit of that privacy because, you're out with everybody else in public and people can't, use it. I want to say videotape, aging myself. That big old camcorder on, but, they can record you. But that is as a private citizen. As a private citizen with First Amendment rights, private businesses, they can record. The government's held to a higher standard. When it's a government agency, they are bound by the limits of the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of the State of Wyoming. And so that's where the difference is when in reference to like these cameras, and like I said before during my comments, that if they want to obtain video from a private company or from a bank or from anything else, they have to get a warrant or consent in order to obtain those. Where these cameras, you're not giving consent and it's warrantless.
Thank you.
So I think that's kind of the difference when it comes, in my opinion,
understood.
to privacy.
Next question.
Thank you. My name's Mark Francisco. I'm the Cheyenne Chief of Police. And I just want to say, number one, thank you guys for, the acknowledgement of the efforts we went to make sure this is implemented correctly. Number two, as someone who's raised my right hand and swore to defend the Constitution, both the United States Constitution and the state Constitution, several times in my life, it is near and dear to my heart. I've heard a lot of mention, not just here, but in the weeks leading up to this, that claim a Fourth Amendment violation with the system we're talking about tonight, the one we use. I'm aware of several federal and state cases that have upheld the right to use these and deemed them not to be constitutional violations. You guys have sort of mentioned constitutional violations, and I'm curious if you know of any case that speaks directly to what we're using and has called it a violation of the Constitution. Thank you.
Sure, I think the Virginia case is going to be the current one. That one was just obviously, as you mentioned, found for the city of Virginia or Norfolk, but it's on appeal. The appeal is strong. So I think the argument, and I think why a lot of people make that statement. I've been careful to definitively make that statement for the reasons you mentioned. I know, in fact, in my presentation, I called it a gray area because it kind of is. Right now, the legal arguments surround the magnitude of surveillance. And so that's going to be, they've already determined that certain type of camera surveillance by government can absolutely exceed the bounds and go into a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's just whether or not the technology is understood enough at this level, because these things are slightly different, although they do, as I mentioned in my presentation, operate in a very similar principle to a normal video camera. They just have a lot more processing, and a lot of the processing and storage just happens in a different location sometimes than the stuff that's already been ruled on. So I think it's just a matter of time. And so, yeah, I think that's the main thing. And then,
Yeah, it's absolutely an opinion, right? The court cases so far are, like you say, and that's why you're able to implement this system. But what I would refer to is you're not allowed to put a GPS tracker on a car without a warrant. And that has been said in court. And what I look at is if we're doing the same thing through a mass camera system, to me that starts to become a technological loophole. And that's really why we want to address this in a public forum, is that if we get down to bits and bytes and cameras and things like that, maybe we need to step up a level and look at are we doing something that we said we shouldn't do, like where you can't, without a warrant, you can't track a single person with a GPS, but it's constitutionally okay to track every single person using a camera system. To me, that's a technological loophole, and I will hold the opinion that a 30-day data tracking without a warrant is unconstitutional.
But those were long no's, right?
Yeah.
To my question, no.
I would add something too, and I posted this online before this meeting. One of the things that is available, I'm not saying that our police use it, but many do. There are data brokers out there that collect data from applications that run on your phone. Those applications almost always ask for location data. Almost everybody knows of an app that you can't even use it unless you enable it. Drives me crazy. I try to sandbox it myself. You have a Pixel phone, you can use Graphene OS. I'm about to myself. But you know, you can add in that data, and now all of a sudden a system with even 24 cameras can become effectively the same as basically putting a GPS tracker in someone's car. And so while, like I said, I don't believe it's happening here, and I would never claim that it's happening here, it has happened elsewhere. And that sort of thing is what will also help push this thing over the edge in a court case.
Sure, and just this is an emerging technology, and the federal government and the federal justice system will take their stances on it. But my job as a state legislator is to listen to the people of Wyoming and to draft statute that our courts will interpret. And so if people of Wyoming would like to have additional protections above and beyond what exists on the federal government, then it's my job to implement that.
Yeah, and like Alan said too, this is a gray area, and as I said before, you know, as technology is advancing very fast, and that's why folks, you being here tonight and being engaged, that's why it's very important to be engaged and to pay attention to what is going on, because we're kind of in the unknown, really, when it comes to this. And so that's why we got to pay attention to what is happening with these systems, what is happening with the policies that are created, and how do they work, you know, to ensure that not only law enforcement can get their job done and to do it effectively and efficiently and to keep us safe, while at the same time not crossing the line into our constitutional rights. And so we are in that gray area. We're in just kind of I don't want to say no man's land, but it's definitely a new era we're in, and we just have to really engage and be very vigilant. And like John said, you know, engage with your council members, engage with your district representatives or your district senators, and ask the questions. And it's not questions because it's like you're afraid or there's a fear or your question. It's to know, it's to educate ourselves better on what is going on and present some ideas to help craft that policy. And so, and that's why I'll tell you again over and over, that's why I'm really happy to have you people here to be engaged in that.
Sure. Let me just say, okay, just to dive into the esoteric here. As someone I really respect who is an elected servant, she reminded me that even as we dive into the unknown, we have our North Star. Those are our convictions. That would be the Constitution of the United States. And it's really up to us as we approach things that are new, that we hold true to our convictions and what we believe is right and wrong. And so those are the principles that I would like to apply as we craft state law.
We have one question up. If anyone else would like to ask a question afterward, please signal me, and I should probably state, if it's not been apparent, I take this position as impartially as possible. So if you have any sort of question, please approach me. Thank you. Next question.
Perfect. Hello, I'm David James, Captain, Operations Captain, Cheyenne Police Department. I've been in Cheyenne Police Department now for 22 years, serving the city of Cheyenne, proudly to serve the city of Cheyenne. So I just wanted to make sure to clear a few things up, okay? In the contract, they talk about two different types of data. Okay, your two different types of data. First one are the customer generated data. Those are the pictures of the back of the car. The picture of the back of the car says Flock does not own and shall not sell this data, period. It does say that they can use that data to improve their learning. And that's actually a big problem we have. Our license plates with the bucking horse and rider and the stacked letters really confuse the learner. And so a good portion of the time, they actually read the license plate incorrectly. We find them by scrolling through the pictures of, what might be the vehicle we're looking for, and then we find it, or we search a partial plate. And so it's important that they have that data to increase their ability to accurately read our license plates. And then it also goes into the anonymized data. I mean, you're talking data like names, dates of birth, cell phone numbers, addresses. That's not recorded at all, period. If you want to know what we see when we look up Flock data, go to our Facebook page. I had Alex post a picture of one of our police cars. Of course, I had to run that license plate as a partial plate because it wouldn't recognize the EX on the license plate. So I ran it as a partial plate and put that picture. It's literally a picture of the car and a license plate. And if you actually look at the plate spelled out on that post, you'll see that the plate number is actually wrong. It counted the bucking horse and rider as another 2. So it's important that they have that data available to make it read the plates better as it goes. And then also, it's nothing new. When you talk about the license plate reader technology, we've been using license plate reader technology. I believe we got our first ones on the back of the cars in 2009. We didn't use it very often because actually, again, even then didn't work very well because Wyoming license plates just have never read well on license plate readers. But we've gone through a couple different ones. And in 2020, we implemented license plate readers on our downtown parking patrol. That's how we do parking. We don't chalk tires anymore. It uses license plate readers to read the plates and record where the cars are parked when they're parked. It's also used in our parking garages to say how long cars are parked in our parking garages. So it was really easy for us when we looked at Flock because we already had a policy in place. And that policy in place was reviewed by several different community groups. And in fact, our PAC group was implemental when we started that parking program using the license plate readers on a regular basis. And we did several community groups came and talked to us about it and said, this is what we want. That's why we implemented the limited amount of time that we retain the data. Because they were like, well, I don't want this data stored forever. Well, that's why we don't store it forever. And as of now, there's been over 30 cases that have gone through regular court and appellate court upholding the constitutionality of Flock. And so that's one thing. I mean, these are public pictures in public places. Betsy brought up the inside of a car. Yes, the inside of a car is protected. Okay, the Carroll Doctrine says that you got to have at least probable cause to search the inside of a car. But outside of a car, they've long held a canine sniff. The air outside of a car, there's no expectation of privacy to the air outside of a car. And so we very much study and we're in depth in how we search and how, before we implement these sorts of policies to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the rights of the city of Cheyenne and the citizens in Cheyenne. And we truly do appreciate it so much. We're absolutely not opposed to legislation that sets limits and guides these sort of things. We ask that you seek input because it is one of those things. This is the single most efficient and effective technological advance into catching criminals in the 22 years that I've been a cop. My dad was a cop since 1973, and I can tell you that it's the most effective and efficient tool in catching criminals since then. Just last month, we had a sex crimes offender, a rapist of a 15-year-old in Cody, Wyoming, go on a 2-month spree where he was at large and everyone was looking for him. He committed multiple burglaries in that time. They don't have flock up in that area of the state. What happened was one of our police officers on the Marshall Task Force started checking our flock for his stolen car because he stole a truck. And sure enough, he has connections in Cheyenne. He was found in Cheyenne. And then we were able to use flock to actually catch him in Colorado, and our marshals went down there and arrested him in Colorado, taking an extremely dangerous person off the street, which otherwise would most likely still be at large. And I can't even tell you how many cases we have where we wouldn't even have a suspect because they happened late at night or other things like that, where there's no witnesses, no way to tell who's there, and now all of a sudden we have flock images from around that time. And so yeah, and then the big thing is we get a picture of the car, look at our Facebook page, see it. There's no data on the people who are in the cars. And that's absolutely what we don't get. And they don't sell anything, or they can't. If they do sell, we sue them. I mean, I would advocate that we sue them right away if any of our data is sold. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think just the difference there is, while I agree that the contract sounds like the other ones that I've read, and it does specify those things, it's what they do with that other information that is part of the anonymized information. And so while I agree that you guys have a very limited license based on your description of the system, basically the most limited of probably any city I've reviewed, probably 30, 40, and I've read, like I said, 3 contracts. So that's good. I mean, that's going to give you better feelings already. But the problem is what the system does underneath. Just because you have a license to something that is restrictive doesn't mean that the suite itself doesn't have all of the data needed for the rest of it. And that's the problem. And so while City of Cheyenne doesn't pay for that, and that's great, probably save us money, and I actually kind of assumed we didn't given the amount of money we spent. Nothing stops a future administration from going beyond that, but also I'm less concerned about that and more concerned about what Flock does with the data that they basically have a perpetual ownership to. And that's really, I think, the distinction. It's not so much what you guys are doing. I think we agree that you guys are using it in a very limited scope, but the problem is what the platform sits on. We just choose what we have access to, but that doesn't stop what they have access to.
And I would just like to emphasize that I am so grateful for our law enforcement here in our community and across the state. My dad had his car stolen, and Cheyenne PD was able to identify the perp and recover the vehicle. And they worked hard to make sure that we're safe in our community. So with that, many of the aspects of the current policy in place with Cheyenne PD can serve as a gold standard as we implement a policy statewide.
The only other thing I'd like to respond on that, and that's an excellent use case of the Flock system, but that exact same process could have happened with a warrant being issued after the 24-hour period. Because you had a stolen car, you would have easily got the warrant. And that would be just my comment on that.
There was a warrant.
So there you go. It would have felt.
But you can't find the person. That's the problem.
But
it was used to find the person.
Right. The warrant, but before searching the Flock system, you had a warrant to search it. You were right to be searching the system. It's just having 30 days worth of data that's accessible without a warrant, I believe is excessive. But that's where the gray area is.
Gentlemen, we just got notified we have 5 minutes till closing. If anyone has any further questions, I would suggest that you meet with the person you have a question for afterwards. If you would all like to take 10 to 50 seconds, because we have 5 minutes, to give a closing statement. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming.
I just want to say thank you for your participation, and that one of the things about technology is it's hard with the standard process, because one of the biggest mistakes with technology is doing a set it and forget it. It's not something you can address once because it's ever changing. And that's where it differs a lot from the laws we've maybe implemented in the past. And so appreciate everybody's cooperation in working through and addressing this issue, and thanks for coming on tonight.
And I just wanted to thank the council, the police for showing up, and for everyone else who showed up here, for the people that are filming, probably post this online as we'll see it. And for the panelists, which between the four of us actually span a pretty good region of the professional field. So I think that's pretty great.
You guys did good.
Yeah, no, again, thank you guys for showing up. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you to our community leaders, city councilmen, mayor, our police department, other legislators. Thank you guys very much for being here. Please continue to be engaged. Please continue to, participate in things like this, because this is how our constitutional republic was set up to work, is the public engages with each other and engages with our elected leaders, and to make sure that we have that dialogue to make things better and to bounce ideas and thoughts off each other to make sure that we have a great community and great policies in place. So thank you guys very much for being here.
Yeah, again, thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm confident that all of us, whether it's in the legislature or in the city or the law enforcement agencies, that we're all working together to make sure that we come up with a policy that accurately reflects the wants and needs of the public. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thanks for everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.